Hey guys, tonight we are going to step out of our sterile, fluoride-scented world and walk straight into a gaslit shop where the pliers are rusty, the hygiene is non-existent, and the screaming is considered just part of the ambiance. We are exploring the horrifying yet ridiculously polite nightmare that was Victorian dentistry. It's a time when a visit to the dentist was less like a medical appointment and more like a back alley wrestling match where one of the participants happens to be holding a pair of pliers. It is a journey into a world where pain wasn't just a sensation, it was practically a lifestyle choice. You probably won't survive this. At least your molars certainly wouldn't if we were actually there. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you're currently nursing a toothache or just grateful that you aren't, let me know where you are listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are walking through the damp, gray mist of a London street in the mid-19th century. The air is thick, hanging low over the cobblestones like a wet wool blanket, carrying that distinct Victorian perfume of coal smoke, horse manure, and the salty tang of the Thames River. But you aren't really paying attention to the atmospheric gloom or the clatter of carriage wheels splashing through puddles nearby. Your entire universe has shrunk down to a single, pulsating point on the lower left side of your jaw. You have a toothache. And in this era, a toothache isn't just a minor inconvenience or a reason to pop a neatly packaged pill. It is an existential crisis with enamel. It is a throbbing, relentless drumbeat that has kept you awake for 3 nights straight, pacing the floorboards of your drafty bedroom while the rest of the house sleeps the sleep of the painless. You have tried everything, of course. You've packed the gum with cloves until your mouth tasted like a festive ham. You've rinsed with salt water until your tongue felt like cured leather. You may have even tried the old wives' tale of holding a roasted onion against your ear, which shockingly did absolutely nothing except make you smell like a roasted onion. So now you have resigned yourself to the inevitable. You have to go see the man. You stop in front of a shop window. It doesn't look like a clinic. There is no pristine white signage, no reception desk visible through the glass, and certainly no soothing elevator music playing to calm your nerves. Instead, the window is cluttered with a confusing assortment of goods. There are leather boots for sale, jars of questionable ointments, perhaps a few blocks of soap, and hanging prominently on a string like a macabre wind chime, a row of extracted human teeth. This is the Victorian version of a Yelp review. It's the tradesman's way of saying, look at all these things I've successfully yanked out of other people's heads. Trust me. You push open the door, and a small bell tinkles above you, a cheerful sound that stands in stark contrast to the dread settling in your stomach. You step inside, and the first thing that hits you is the smell. It's a sensory cocktail that would make a modern health inspector faint on the spot. The air inside the shop is warm and stagnant. It smells primarily of stale tobacco smoke, because pipe smoking is apparently a mandatory part of the dental uniform. Underneath the tobacco, there is the sharp, chemical bite of blacking wax used for polishing shoes, mixed with the lanolin scent of raw wool. And beneath all of that, clinging to the wooden floorboards and the heavy velvet drapes, is the faint metallic scent of dried blood and the unmistakable odor of human panic. It smells of commerce and carnage. You look around the waiting area. Waiting room is a generous term for what is essentially a wooden bench pushed against a peeling wall, situated uncomfortably close to where the doctor is currently working on a pair of riding boots. That's the reality you have to accept as you take your seat on the hardwood. The person you are here to see is likely not a doctor in the way you understand the word. In the mid-Victorian era, dentistry is still very much a trade, not a profession. It's a side hustle. Your dentist might be a blacksmith who is good with tongs. He might be a wig maker who figured that if he deals with heads, he might as well deal with what's inside them. Or most commonly, he is a barber surgeon. The same man who trims your beard and cuts your hair is also the man authorized to reach into your mouth with cold steel and twist. It's the ultimate bundle deal: a shave, a haircut, and a traumatic extraction, all for a few shillings. You sit on the bench, clutching your hat in your hands, trying to distract yourself from the throbbing in your jaw. There is another soul waiting next to you, a woman with a shawl wrapped tightly around her head, looking as if she would rather be anywhere else on earth, perhaps even a French prison. You exchange a brief, polite nod. The Victorians are famous for their stiff upper lip, even when that lip is swollen to the size of a plum. There is a stoicism here that borders on the pathological. Historians still argue whether this legendary Victorian tolerance for pain was a genuine cultural virtue, a sign of moral fortitude, or if it was simply a coping mechanism born from a complete lack of alternatives. When the only other option is screaming into the void, you tend to just sit quietly and endure. From the back of the shop, behind a flimsy folding screen that offers about as much privacy as a chain-link fence, you hear a low groan. It's followed by a sharp intake of breath, a muffled curse, and the sound of something heavy clattering into a metal basin. You wince. The woman next to you stares blankly at a spot on the wall where the wallpaper pattern has mismatched roses. This is the polite nightmare. Everything is civil. The shopkeeper, let's call him Mr. Grindle, steps out from behind the screen, wiping his hands on a stained leather apron. He smiles at you, revealing a set of teeth that are ironically in terrible condition. He looks less like a medical professional and more like a man who fixes wagons, which, to be fair, he probably does on Tuesdays. He gestures to you with a hand that still has traces of shoe polish under the fingernails. "You're next," he says, with the casual tone of a man calling out a deli order. You stand up, your legs feeling heavy, as if gravity has suddenly doubled in this room. You aren't walking toward a reclining chair with lumbar support and a nice view of a television screen on the ceiling. You are walking toward a simple wooden armchair that looks like it was stolen from a dining set. It sits in the center of the room, bathed in the unforgiving light of a gas lamp that hisses softly, casting long, flickering shadows against the walls. The chair has leather straps on the arms. You try not to think about why a dentist's chair would need restraints, but your brain helpful supplies the answer anyway. They aren't there to keep you safe, they are there to keep you still. As you approach the chair, you notice the instrument tray. It's a wooden side table cluttered with tools that look like they were borrowed from a medieval torture museum and used to repair horse-drawn carriages. There are hooks, levers, and pliers that seem far too large to fit comfortably inside a human mouth. They are rusted in spots, dull in others, and they lie there in a pile, unwashed from the previous patient. The concept of sterilization is still a few decades away from being taken seriously. Germ theory is currently just a rumor floating around in the heads of a few eccentric scientists, certainly not something that has penetrated the thick skull of Mr. Grindle the barber shoe repairman. You sit down. The wood is hard against your back. Mr. Grindle pumps the pedal of the chair, a crude hydraulic mechanism that jerks you upward with a mechanical lurch. He leans in close, and you are hit with a wave of his personal atmosphere, stale beer, onions, and the tobacco he's currently chewing. Open wide, he commands, picking up a metal probe that looks suspiciously like a knitting needle. You grip the armrests of the chair until your knuckles turn white. You are trapped in a space between the mundane and the horrific. Outside, the world goes on. Carts roll by, people buy newspapers, the empire expands. But in here, time has stopped. It is just you, the flickering gaslight, and the looming realization that the only way out of this pain is through a door labeled more pain. This is the Victorian waiting room experience. It is a place where you wait not for relief, but for a slightly different, sharper kind of suffering. And as Mr. Grindle brings the metal closer to your face, humming a Johnny tune that was popular 3 years ago, you realize that the most terrifying part isn't the pain itself, it's the casualness of it all. It's the fact that this is normal. You are still sitting in that wooden chair, the leather straps cool against your wrists, staring up at Mr. Grindle. As you look at him, really look at him, you start to notice the details that your pain-addled brain missed a moment ago. He isn't wearing the crisp, sterile scrubs of a modern medical professional. There is no white coat to signal authority or cleanliness. Instead, he is wearing a heavy leather apron that looks like a chaotic abstract painting, stiff with layers of wax, oil, and dark stains that you decide for your own sanity not to identify too closely. This is the reality of the era. Your dentist is almost certainly moonlighting, or rather, dentistry is the moonlighting gig. In the Victorian world, specialization is a luxury the working class cannot afford. In our modern time, we have doctors for your left foot and different doctors for your right foot, and they rarely speak to each other. But here, the economy is built on the hustle. Mr. Grindle is a man of many talents, and unfortunately for you, one of those talents involves pliers. The man standing over you with a metal hook in his hand might spend his mornings resolutely hammering hobnails into the soles of work boots. This explains the smell of leather and glue that clings to his clothes like a second skin. It also explains why his hands are massive, calloused paws with the grip strength of a hydraulic press. There is a certain terrifying logic to it, if you think about it long enough. A cobbler spends his day pulling nails out of old shoe heels and hammering new ones in. Structurally speaking, a tooth is just a nail that screams. The mechanics of leverage are roughly the same, whether you are repairing a Wellington boot or removing a molar. But perhaps Mr. Grindle isn't a cobbler. Depending on where you live, maybe a smaller village outside the smog of London, he might be the local blacksmith. This is a common crossover episode in rural Victorian life. The blacksmith has the forge, he has the tongs, and most importantly, he has the upper body strength to wrestle a stubborn root out of a jawbone. If you go to the blacksmith for a tooth extraction, you are essentially asking a man who bends iron for a living to treat your delicate mouth tissues with the same level of finesse he uses to shoe a draft horse. The chair you are sitting in might actually be a barrel, and the waiting room is just the corner of the smithy where the sparks don't fly quite as often. Or, and this is the classic combination, he is a barber. This is the most legendary duo in medical history, the barber-surgeon. For centuries, the men who cut hair were also the men who cut flesh. It's a tradition that goes back to the Middle Ages, but it hangs on grimly in the Victorian era, especially for the poor. You know that red and white striped pole you see spinning outside barber shops today? The one that looks like a harmless candy cane? That's not a design choice for aesthetics. It's a graphic representation of blood and bandages. The red is the arterial blood, the white is the linen bandage, and the pole itself represents the stick the patient would squeeze to make their veins pop out for bloodletting. So as you sit there, you are looking at a man whose resume reads haircuts, shaves, leech application, and emergency amputations. It's a one-stop shop for body maintenance. You can get your beard trimmed, your boots soled, and your teeth pulled, possibly all in the same hour, and possibly with the same tool if he's in a rush. Imagine the confusion of the workspace surrounding you. To your left, on a dusty shelf, sits a row of wooden shoe lasts, those foot-shaped molds used for making boots. To your right, a jar of leeches sits next to a tin of tobacco. On the wall, a pair of sheep shears hangs ominously close to the dental key. Historians still argue whether this multidisciplinary approach was actually a disaster or a strange sort of benefit. Some scholars suggest that these tradesmen, the cobblers, the jewelers, the woodworkers, actually possessed a level of manual dexterity that the educated physicians of the time lacked. A watchmaker, for instance, has steady hands. A silversmith understands precision. A university-trained physician in the 1850s might know a lot of Latin and the theory of humors, but he might not have the raw mechanical skill to pry a calcified tooth out of a jawbone without shattering the skull. So in a twisted way, you might be better off with the guy who fixes watches. At least he knows how to hold a pair of tweezers. But right now, looking at Mr. Grindle, you aren't thinking about his manual dexterity. You are watching him wipe a fleck of something. Is that horse manure? Off his sleeve before reaching for your face. He is chatting amiably about the weather, or perhaps the price of coal, treating this interaction with the casual demeanor of a man selling you a bag of oats. To him, your mouth is just another job. It's a broken hinge that needs oiling, a loose screw that needs tightening. The sanctity of the human body hasn't really entered the equation. He picks up a tool. It looks like a pair of pliers that has seen hard times. Found these at the market, he says, or something equally reassuring. Good leverage. You realize that for Mr. Grindle, the distinction between patient and customer is non-existent. You are a transaction. The cost of this procedure, probably a shilling, maybe less. If you were in the countryside, you might even barter for it. A tooth extraction could cost you a chicken or a basket of eggs. Imagine trading a dozen fresh eggs for the privilege of having a man kneel on your chest and wrench a bone out of your head. It's the worst trade deal in the history of commerce. As he leans in, his shadow falls over your face, blocking out the gaslight. You can see the pores on his nose. You can see the grit under his fingernails, grit that has traveled from the street to the shoe leather to the sheep's wool, and is now about to make a permanent home in your gum line. The concept of cross-contamination isn't just ignored, it's practically the business model. He tells you to tilt your head back. You comply, because at this point, you have surrendered your agency to the man with the apron. You stare up at the ceiling, which is stained with soot from the gas lamps, and you try to find a pattern in the cracks of the plaster to focus on. Anything to take your mind off the fact that a man who potentially just finished cleaning a horse's hoof is about to perform surgery on you. Wide now, he grunts. You open your mouth. The air in the room feels heavy, charged with the static of your own anxiety. You hear the crunch of his boots on the floorboards, boots he probably repaired himself. You hear the rustle of the stiff leather apron, and you realize that there is no receptionist to save you, no nurse to hold your hand, and certainly no numbing gel to dull the sensation. There is just you, the tradesman, and the pliers. It is a peculiar kind of intimacy, this relationship between the Victorian sufferer and the jack of all trades. You are placing your most vulnerable pain in the hands of a man who views it as a mechanical problem. To him, you are a puzzle made of meat and bone, and as the metal touches your tooth, cold and tasting of iron, you close your eyes and try to remember that technically, this man is a professional. He's just a professional at a lot of other things too, before Mr. Grindle actually clamps his iron pliers onto your jaw. Let's take a moment to appreciate exactly why you are here. You didn't just wake up this morning and decide that a visit to a tobacco-stained cobbler sounded like a fun outing. You are here because you have been driven to the brink of madness by a tiny calcified demon living inside your head. You are experiencing the Victorian toothache, which is less of a medical condition and more of a spiritual dismantling of your will to live. In the modern world, pain is a glitch. It's an error message. You get a headache, you swallow 2 pills, and you go back to scrolling through social media. We treat pain as an infringement on our rights, something to be filed away and deleted immediately. But in the 1850s, pain is a roommate. It moves in, unpacks its bags, and refuses to pay rent. A toothache back then wasn't just hurting. It was an all-consuming lifestyle. It was an existential crisis with enamel. Imagine the sensation. It starts as a dull throb, keeping time with your heartbeat like a sadistic metronome. Over the course of a few days, it evolves. It becomes sharp, hot, and electric. It feels as though someone has driven a heated knitting needle into your jawbone and is slowly twisting it every time you try to formulate a thought. It is a presence so loud that it drowns out the noise of the bustling street outside. You can't eat. You can't sleep. You certainly can't hold a polite conversation about the great exhibition or the price of tea in China, because your entire consciousness has collapsed into a singularity of agony located in your lower left molar. And the worst part? You have absolutely no idea why it is happening. This brings us to one of the most persistent and bizarre beliefs of the time. While some progressive medical men are starting to whisper about decay and bacteria, the average person, and likely you, in your pain-addled state, still clings to the ancient theory of the toothworm. This is a fringe tidbit that refuses to die. For thousands of years, people believed that a literal worm was boring its way through the tooth, eating the roots like an apple core. When the pain throbs, that's the worm thrashing around. It's a horrifying mental image, isn't it? Imagine lying in bed, staring at the cracked plaster of your ceiling, convinced that a microscopic parasite is having a dinner party inside your mouth. Because the cause is misunderstood, the cures are a chaotic mix of witchcraft, wishful thinking, and household condiments. You have tried them all before coming to Mr. Grindle. First, you tried the superstitious route. You might have gone into the garden at midnight and touched a nail to the sore tooth, then driven that nail into an oak tree, theoretically transferring the pain to the tree. If the tree dies later, well, that's just collateral damage. Or perhaps you tried wearing a necklace made of dried mole paws. Yes, the paws of a mole. Historians still argue whether these folk remedies were purely magical thinking, or if the sheer absurdity of the ritual provided a placebo effect strong enough to distract the brain from the pain signals. Basically, you are so busy hunting for a mole in the dark that you forget your jaw is exploding. When the mole paws failed, you turned to the kitchen cabinet. You mashed up garlic and cloves, creating a paste that burned your gums raw but offered a fleeting moment of numbness. You may have even tried a poultice of mustard and vinegar, applied directly to the cheek, which likely resulted in a chemical burn on your skin to match the ache in your bone. Now you have two sources of pain, which is technically a distraction, but not a cure. But let's be honest. The primary tool in your pain management arsenal wasn't garlic or magic nails. It was gin. Gin is the great Victorian anesthetic. It is the translucent, juniper-scented river upon which the working class floats to escape their misery. In an era before aspirin, before ibuprofen, before anything that actually blocks pain receptors, alcohol is the only way to turn down the volume of the world. You don't take a sip, you take a dose. You swirl the cheap burning liquid around the bad tooth, letting the alcohol sear the nerve endings. Then you swallow. Then you repeat. The gin available to you isn't the refined botanical craft spirit we drink today with a slice of cucumber and a splash of tonic. This is mother's ruin. It is harsh, oily, and tastes like turpentine mixed with regret. It is often adulterated with things like sulfuric acid or turpentine to give it more kick. So essentially, you are treating your dental infection with industrial solvent. After a few hours of this treatment, the pain doesn't necessarily go away. It just moves further away. It feels like the toothache is happening to someone else, someone standing slightly to your left. You are floating in a haze, your limbs heavy, your mind foggy. And this is the state in which most patients arrive at the dentist, half drunk, terrified, and smelling like a distillery explosion. It's a safety hazard for everyone involved, especially considering the open flames used for lighting, but it's the only mercy available. This reliance on alcohol highlights a grim reality of the time. In the Victorian mindset, there is a deep fatalism about the body. The body is a vessel destined to decay. Teeth are expected to rot. Most people expect to lose half their teeth by the time they are 40. A full set of white teeth in adulthood is suspicious. It looks like vanity, or perhaps false teeth. So the toothache is viewed almost as a moral trial. You are expected to bear it with grim determination until it becomes unbearable. You held out as long as you could. You paced the floorboards until the wood wore smooth. You drank the gin until the bottle was empty. You prayed to saints you didn't even believe in. But the worm kept gnawing. The existential crisis deepened. The pain became a wall that separated you from the rest of humanity. You watched people laughing on the street through your window and felt a surge of resentment. How dare they smile? Don't they know your mouth is on fire? This isolation is what finally breaks you. It's not just the physical sensation. It's the inability to function as a human being. You can't work. You can't sleep. You can't think. You are reduced to a single vibrating nerve. So you put on your coat. You wrap a scarf around your swollen jaw, a universal signal in Victorian London that says, "Do not talk to me. I am in hell." You walk out into the gray drizzle, leaving the empty gin bottle on the table. You walk past the apothecary, who sold you the useless clove oil. You walk past the church, where your prayers went unanswered. and you head toward the one man who offers a solution. It is a permanent solution. It is a violent solution. But it is an end, and that brings us back to the chair. The alcohol in your system has taken the edge off your panic, but not the throbbing in your jaw. That is still there, sharp and clear. Mr. Grindle knows this. He smells the gin on your breath and nods understandingly. He's seen it 1,000 times. He knows that you are not here for a checkup. You are here for an eviction. You want this thing out of your head, and you don't care if he has to use a rusty spoon to do it. The tragedy of the Victorian toothache is that the cure is often feared just as much as the disease. You have spent days weighing the agony of the rot against the agony of the steel, and finally, the rot won. The worm won. You have surrendered. You sit back, the gin making the room spin ever so slightly, and you open your mouth to let the nightmare end and the other nightmare begin. Mr. Grindle turns away from you for a moment, and you hear the clinking of metal on wood. This is the moment where, in a modern dentist's office, you would see a neatly organized tray of stainless steel instruments, each one wrapped in sterile blue paper, looking like precision tools designed by NASA. But here, in the flickering gaslight of 1850, the instrument tray looks more like the clearance bin at a hardware store that specializes in medieval siege warfare. You crane your neck carefully so as not to disturb the volcano in your jaw to get a better look. What you see does not fill you with confidence. It fills you with the sudden urge to jump out of the window. The tools of Victorian dentistry are a masterclass in crude efficiency. They were not designed with patient comfort in mind. They were designed with one simple goal: leverage. The fundamental physics of extracting a tooth haven't changed much in thousands of years, but the finesse certainly has. These instruments look heavy, they look industrial, and they look suspiciously like they were used to repair a carriage wheel 10 minutes ago. The centerpiece of this terrifying collection is the forceps. But calling them forceps feels too delicate. These are pliers, big, heavy, iron pliers, with handles long enough to provide the torque needed to crush a walnut or a jawbone. The metal is pitted and dark, stained with the oxidation of age and the residue of previous battles. There is no polished chrome here. This is raw iron, forged by a blacksmith who was thinking about horseshoes, not human gums. The beaks of the pliers, the part that actually grabs your tooth, are thick and blunt. They don't so much grip the tooth as they do maul it into submission. Next to the pliers sits the elevator. This sounds like a device that might gently lift you to a higher floor, perhaps one with a nice view. In reality, it is a metal spike with a flat tip, used to jam between the tooth and the bone to pry the root loose. It looks exactly like a flathead screwdriver that has been sharpened by a prison inmate. The handle is made of wood, worn smooth by years of sweaty palms gripping it tight. You can almost see the ghosts of Mr. Grindle's previous patients in the dark patina of that wood. But the most disturbing thing about these tools isn't just their shape, it's their versatility. And remember, Mr. Grindle is a man of many trades. He doesn't have the budget or the inclination to buy separate toolkits for every job. Why buy a specific pair of dental pliers when the ones you use for pulling nails out of horses' hooves work just fine? Why buy a delicate scalpel when your leather-cutting knife is right there? There is a horrifying multi-purpose pragmatism at play here. That hook, it's perfect for cleaning the stones out of a gelding's hoof. It's also great for scraping tartar off a molar. That small hammer, ideal for tapping a shoe heel into place. Also useful for, well, let's not think about what the hammer is for in a dental context. The lines between veterinary science, cobbling, and dentistry are blurred to the point of invisibility. The bacteria on these tools is a cosmopolitan mix of stable yard, street mud, and human saliva. You spot another instrument that looks like a pelican's beak. In fact, it's called a pelican. It's a tool that dates back to the 14th century, and the fact that it's still here in the 19th says a lot about the pace of dental innovation. The pelican works on a fulcrum principle. The dentist hooks the claw over the tooth, braces the bolster against your gum or the tooth next to it, and levers it out sideways. It is a brutal motion. It doesn't pull the tooth up, it knocks it over. It's the equivalent of removing a fence post by hitting it with a truck. As you stare at these instruments, you notice something else. They are laid out on a piece of velvet that might have once been red, but is now a stiff, brownish maroon. There is no autoclave in the corner, hissing with steam. There is no bottle of disinfectant alcohol. Mr. Shugrindle doesn't wash the tools between patients. Why would he? The concept of invisible germs causing infection is still largely laughed at by the medical establishment. Disease is caused by miasma, bad air. If the air smells okay, which in here it definitely does not, then it's fine. So the blood on the pliers from the last patient, a burly dock worker with a foul temper, is simply wiped off with a rag, or maybe on Mr. Grindle's apron. That same pair of pliers is now destined for your mouth. You are about to participate in a biological exchange program that you did not sign up for. Mr. Grindle picks up a tool. It's a gum lancet. It looks like a small curved knife. Gotta clear the way first, he mumbles, testing the edge of the blade against his thumb. His thumb is calloused and dirty. He explains, in a matter-of-fact tone, that before he can pull the tooth, he has to cut the gum tissue away from it. This is to prevent the gum from tearing when the tooth comes out. It sounds logical in a gruesome sort of way. It's like peeling a sticker off a piece of fruit before you eat it, except the fruit is your jawbone and the sticker is your own flesh. It's a bit rusted, he admits, glancing at the blade. But rust adds character, eh? He's joking. You hope he's joking. But in the dim light, the rust on the blade looks very real. Tetanus is a very real possibility here. Lockjaw. It's a cruel irony. You come in to fix your jaw, and you leave with a disease that locks it shut forever. The torture museum aesthetic is complete. You are surrounded by cold, hard iron. The tools are heavy, clumsy, and brutal. They are artifacts of an age that values force over finesse. There is no high-speed drill to whine in your ear. There is only the squeak of metal hinges and the scrape of steel on bone. Mr. Grindle sets the lancet down and picks up the pliers again. He hefts them in his hand, getting the feel of the weight. He looks at you, he looks at the pliers, he looks back at you. Open, he says. You watch the pliers approach. They look enormous. They block out the light. They block out the room. They are the only thing in the universe. And as the cold metal touches your lip, you realize that the most terrifying thing about these tools isn't what they look like. It's that they are about to be operated by a man who treats your mouth like a broken carriage wheel. He isn't trying to save the tooth. He isn't trying to preserve your smile. He is just trying to get the job done using the only tools he has, the heavy, rusted relics of a trade that hasn't quite decided if it's medicine or mechanics. And you are just the raw material. You are the wood that needs planing, the iron that needs bending. You close your eyes tight, bracing yourself against the hard wood of the chair, and wait for the mechanics to begin. You are now intimately acquainted with the chair, the straps, and the terrifying array of rusted ironmongery on the table. But the most dangerous instrument in this room isn't made of metal. It is made of flesh and bone. It is the pair of hands currently hovering inches from your face. Let's talk about Mr. Grindle. In the modern world, your dentist is a creature of anonymity and sterility. They are masked, goggled, and gloved. They are wrapped in so much protective blue paper that you can barely tell if there is a human being underneath. They smell like antiseptic soap and expensive coffee. But Mr. Grindle is high-definition, unadulterated humanity, and he is entirely, unapologetically filthy. He leans in close, invading your personal space with the confidence of a man who owns the pliers. You can see the geography of his face in uncomfortable detail. There is a small scar on his chin, likely from a shaving accident or a bar fight. There are broken capillaries in his nose, a roadmap of the gin that fuels his trade. And then there are his hands. Mr. Grindle's hands are massive. They are the hands of a man who works for a living, hands that have gripped hammer handles, pulled on leather straps, and wrangled terrified sheep. They are covered in a thicket of coarse hair and calluses that are rough enough to strike a match on. But what really captures your attention and your rising panic is the color. They are not pink and scrubbed. They are stained a permanent mottled gray. This is the residue of his day. Remember, this man is a multi-hyphenate. Those dark smudges on his knuckles? That's likely shoe polish from the boots he was repairing when you walked in. The yellowish tint on his palms? That could be lanolin from the wool he was shearing earlier, or perhaps tobacco stains from his pipe. And the dark grit wedged deep beneath his fingernails, the mourning borders, as they are sometimes poetically called, is a geological layer of London street grime, horse dander, and soot. And he is about to put those hands directly into your mouth. There is no sink in the corner of the room. There is no pump bottle of antibacterial soap. Germ theory in the 1850s is a concept that exists only in the minds of a few hysterical scientists on the continent. The medical establishment of the time generally operates on the principle that a gentleman's hands are clean by definition. To suggest that a doctor, or even a barber surgeon, should wash his hands before touching a patient is considered insulting. It implies that he is dirty. It is a breach of etiquette. So Mr. Grindle does not wash up. He performs what passes for the Victorian equivalent of sterilization. He wipes his hands on his apron. You look at the apron. It is a heavy leather garment that acts as a visual diary of his career. There are old bloodstains that have turned a rusty brown. There are patches of grease. There are stiffened areas where unknown fluids have dried and caked. By wiping his hands on this apron, he isn't cleaning them. He is simply reloading them with a fresh culture of bacteria from last week's patients. He is essentially seasoning his fingers with a microbial spice blend of every infection he has encountered in the last month. Let's have a look then, he grunts. He pries your mouth open. He doesn't use a sterile mirror. He uses his fingers. He hooks a thick, calloused index finger into your cheek and pulls. The sensation is startling. His skin is rough, like sandpaper against the delicate, inflamed mucous membranes of your mouth. You can taste him. It is a distinct flavor, salty, metallic, and vaguely reminiscent of old pennies and wet dog. This is the dirty, non-sterile environment the history books warn you about. But reading about it is one thing. Feeling the grit from a cobbler's thumb grinding against your infected gum is another. You try to breathe through your nose to avoid inhaling his exhalations, which smell strongly of onions and the inevitable tobacco. He chews tobacco while he works, of course. Occasionally, he might turn his head to spit into a brass cuspidor in the corner. If his aim is bad, well, that's just part of the decor. As he probes your sore tooth, poking it with a force that makes you whimper, you have to wonder about the invisible war happening on his fingertips. Historians and medical anthropologists often point out that the sheer variety of bacteria on a Victorian barber surgeon's hands would baffle a modern microbiologist. There are pathogens here from the barnyard, from the street gutters, from the leather tanning pits. By introducing these into your mouth, specifically into the open wound he is about to create, he is inviting a secondary infection that could be far more lethal than the toothache itself. Sepsis isn't just a risk here, it's a probability. But Mr. Grindle doesn't know this, or if he does, he doesn't care. To him, pus is just a humor that needs to be let out. Inflammation is just heat that needs to be cooled. He taps the offending molar with his fingernail, sending a shockwave of pain through your skull. Rotten to the root, he declares, with the satisfaction of a man finding a bad apple in a barrel. Got a worm in there the size of a maggot, I reckon. He believes this. He genuinely believes there is a worm. This is the level of medical expertise you are dealing with. You are entrusting your health to a man who thinks your dental decay is caused by a tiny, invisible snake. He removes his hand from your mouth to reach for the pliers, and you feel a strange, cold emptiness where his hot, rough fingers were. You almost miss them, which is a sign of how delirious the pain has made you. You watch as he grips the handles of the pliers. He doesn't check if they are clean. He doesn't wipe the beak of the pliers. He just hefts them. The environment around you reinforces this lack of sterility. The floor is wooden and has likely never seen a mop, only a broom that pushes the dust around. The walls are covered in fabric wallpaper, which is excellent for trapping dust, smoke, and airborne particles from every cough and sneeze that has occurred in this room for the last 20 years. Even the air you are breathing feels heavy and recycled. In a modern context, we are terrified of contamination. If a dentist drops a tool on the floor, they apologize profusely and get a new one. If Mr. Grindle dropped the pliers on the floor, he would pick them up, blow on them, and say, 5-second rule, or the Victorian equivalent, which is likely, God made dirt, and dirt don't hurt. This is the gamble you are taking. You are trading the certainty of the toothache for the uncertainty of the infection. You are betting that your immune system, fortified by a diet of bread, tea, and London smog, is strong enough to fight off whatever microscopic horrors are living in the creases of Mr. Grindle's palms. He turns back to you, the pliers in his right hand. His left hand, the dirty one, comes back to your face to brace your jaw. He grips your chin. His thumb presses down on your tongue to keep it out of the way. You gag slightly, tasting the shoe polish again. Hold fast now, he says. This might tickle. It is a lie. It is the biggest lie ever told in the history of this room. But you don't argue. You can't argue. You are pinned by the weight of his hand, immobilized by the fear of the pliers, and silently praying that Mr. Grindle washed his hands at least once since he shoed that horse this morning. But as the iron moves past his lips and into the dark cavern of your mouth, you catch a whiff of manure, and you know with sinking certainty that he definitely did not. Mr. Grindle hesitates. He is holding the pliers, but he looks at your mouth with the critical eye of a carpenter assessing a particularly knotty piece of oak. He gives the molar a little experimental wiggle with his thumb, and you feel a fresh wave of lightning shoot through your nervous system. He shakes his head. The pliers apparently are not enough. The tooth is too deep, the root too stubborn, or perhaps he just feels like using the heavy artillery today. He puts the pliers down. They land with a heavy clank on the wooden table, and then he reaches for the icon of Victorian dentistry. He reaches for the tooth key. If you have never seen a dental key, also known as a turnkey, count yourself lucky. It does not look like a medical instrument. It looks like something you would use to wind up a grandfather clock, or perhaps open a very heavy door in a dungeon. It consists of a long metal shaft with a handle at the top, usually made of wood or ivory, shaped like the handle of a corkscrew. At the bottom end, there is a hinged metal claw, swinging loosely like a trapeze artist. It looks deceptively simple. It looks mechanical. In the dim light, it almost looks elegant. But do not be fooled. This object is responsible for more shattered jawbones in the 19th century than bar fights and horse kicks combined. The design is based on the mechanics of a door key, hence the name. But instead of turning a lock, the dentist turns the tooth. The idea is to clamp the metal claw over the top of the tooth, brace the metal shaft against the gum or the tooth next to it, and then twist the handle. It uses the principle of the fulcrum. It is raw, unadulterated physics applied to the human face. Mr. Grindle wraps the claw in a small piece of lint or rag. This is the Victorian attempt at a cushion. It is supposed to protect your gum from the crushing pressure of the metal bolster. In reality, it does about as much good as wrapping a sledgehammer in a napkin. It is a gesture, nothing more. Open wide, he murmurs, positioning the device. You feel the cold metal slide into your mouth. It feels heavy, far heavier than the pliers. The shaft presses against the side of your jaw. The little claw swings over the top of your rotten molar and hooks onto the inside surface. You can feel the sharp point of the claw digging into the enamel, finding its purchase. It clicks into place. Now you are locked in. You are mechanically attached to Mr. Grindle's wrist. The horror of the tooth key lies in its motion. Forceps pull up. They try to slide the tooth out of its socket the way it grew in, but the key doesn't pull up. It twists sideways. Mr. Grindle is going to turn the handle like he is opening a bottle of wine. He is going to use the side of your jawbone as the fulcrum to lever the tooth out of your head. Imagine a fence post stuck in the ground. You could try to pull it straight up, which is hard. Or you could push it sideways until the earth around it gives way and the post falls over. The tooth key is the push it sideways method. The problem, of course, is that the earth in this metaphor is your alveolar bone. Mr. Grindle tightens his grips on the handle. He plants his feet on the floorboards for stability. He might even place his other hand on your forehead to hold you down. You are now a piece of carpentry work clamped to a bench. Ready? He asks, but he doesn't wait for an answer. He begins to turn. The sensation is indescribable. It isn't pain at first. It is pressure, immense, crushing pressure. You feel your head being forced to the side. You feel the metal bolster digging into your gum, crushing the soft tissue against the hard bone underneath. The rag cushion does nothing. You can feel the grain of the metal through the fabric. He keeps turning. The torque builds. The tooth is fighting back. It is anchored deep in the jaw, fused by years of existence. But the key has the mechanical advantage. Something has to give. And then you hear it. You hear the sound that will haunt your nightmares for the rest of your life. It is a loud, dry crack. It sounds like a dry branch snapping in a winter forest. It reverberates through your skull, echoing in your ears like a gunshot. It is the sound of the tooth giving up the ghost. But often, it is also the sound of the jawbone fracturing. Because the key exerts so much sideways force, it frequently tears the tooth out along with a substantial chunk of the surrounding bone. It's like pulling a carrot out of the garden and bringing a fist-sized clump of dirt with it. Except the dirt is your skeleton. In the dental profession, if we can call it that, this is known as alveolar fracture. To Mr. Grindle, it's just collateral damage. He gives one final wrenching twist, and the pressure suddenly vanishes. The tooth pops loose. He pulls the key out of your mouth. You are gasping, your eyes watering, your hands gripping the armrest so tightly that your fingernails are digging into the wood. You taste the sudden rush of iron, blood filling your mouth. Mr. Grindle holds the key up to the light, inspecting his prize. Dangling from the claw is your molar. It looks grotesque with long, twisted roots. But attached to the side of the tooth, looking like a piece of white coral, is a jagged shard of your jawbone. Stubborn one, he says, admiring the carnage. He flicks the tooth into a metal bowl, where it lands with a cheerful ping among the other trophies of the day. This tool, this tooth key, is a paradox. It was the standard instrument for over a century. It was considered efficient, and technically it was. It got the tooth out. It didn't matter if it took a piece of the jaw with it. It didn't matter if it shattered the healthy tooth next to it, which happened frequently since the bolster rested on the neighbor. If you came in with one bad tooth, you might leave with 2 missing teeth and a hairline fracture in your mandible. Historians often look at the tooth key and wonder how humanity endured it. It looks like a torture device because, functionally, it is one. It ignores anatomy in favor of leverage. It treats the human mouth like a locked box that needs to be broken open. As you sit there, spitting blood into the basin, you run your tongue over the gap. It feels huge. It feels ragged. There are sharp edges of bone sticking up through the gum where the key did its dirty work. It is a crater, but the throbbing ache of the worm is gone, replaced by the sharp, screaming agony of the extraction. In the twisted logic of Victorian medicine, this is a success. The problem has been removed, and the fact that your jaw feels like it has been kicked by a mule is a secondary concern. Mr. Grindle wipes the blood off the key with his apron. He doesn't wash it, he just wipes it. The key goes back onto the table, ready for the next victim. It sits there, looking like a harmless piece of ironmongery, a bottle opener for a bottle that should never be opened. You have survived the key. But as you look at the blood swirling in the basin, you realize that the procedure isn't over. The extraction was just the main event. Now comes the cleanup, and in a room full of non-sterile spectators, even the cleanup is a spectator sport. You are sitting there, clutching your swollen jaw, tasting iron and regret, when you notice something unsettling. You are not alone. And I don't just mean you are with Mr. Grindle. I mean you are being watched. In the modern world, medical procedures are the ultimate private experience. You go into a small room, The door is closed, and there are laws, strict federal laws with serious acronyms, that ensure your medical history remains a secret between you and your doctor. If a stranger wandered in and started eating popcorn while you had a root canal, you would call the police. But in the Victorian era, privacy is a concept reserved for the rich, and even then it is used sparingly. For everyone else, life is a communal event, and that includes your agony. You look past Mr. Grindle's shoulder through the grime-streaked window of the shop. There is a small group of street urchins pressing their noses against the glass, fogging it up with their breath. They are watching you. One of them points at your bloodied mouth and laughs. A woman pushing a cart of turnips pauses to peer inside, critiquing Mr. Grindle's technique to her neighbor. "He's using the key," she seems to mouth. "Nasty business, that." You realize with a sinking feeling that your suffering is not just a medical procedure. It is the midday matinee. It is a light, bloody sport before lunch. To understand this, you have to understand the landscape of Victorian entertainment. There is no television. There is no radio. The internet is a century and a half away. If you want to see something interesting, you have to leave your house and find it. And few things are more interesting to the human psyche than watching someone else in pain, especially when you can tell yourself it's educational. While Mr. Grindle operates out of a shop, a huge portion of dental work in this era takes place in the open air, at market squares, country fairs, and bustling street corners. This is the domain of the traveling tooth drawer. These men are part doctor, part carnival barker, and part con artist. They don't wait for patients to come to them. They roll into town on a wagon, set up a stage, and promise to pull teeth painlessly for a penny. Imagine the scene. You are walking through a crowded market. The air smells of roasted chestnuts, unwashed bodies, and horse manure. You hear the sound of a brass band playing a loud, frantic tune. You follow the noise and find a crowd gathered around a raised wooden platform. On the stage stands a man dressed in robes that look like a magician's costume, bright red velvet, perhaps covered in gold stars or strange occult symbols. He is wearing a necklace. As you get closer, you realize the necklace is not made of pearls. It is made of human molars, thousands of them, strung together like popcorn on a Christmas tree. This is his resume. It is a gruesome visual proof of his experience. The crowd is thick. People are eating meat pies, drinking ale, and jostling for a better view. They are here for the show, and the show is you. The tooth drawer calls for volunteers. "Who among you is brave?" he shouts. "Who is suffering from the worm?" A poor soul, clutching his jaw just as you were earlier, steps up to the stage. The crowd cheers. It is a mix of encouragement and mockery. They know what is coming. The patient sits in a chair in the center of the stage. The tooth drawer plays to the crowd. He waves his forceps in the air like a magic wand. He makes jokes. He might even have a monkey on his shoulder to distract the children. Then the extraction begins. And here is where the band comes in. You might have thought the musicians were there to attract a crowd. That is only half the truth. The primary purpose of the drummer and the trumpet player is acoustic camouflage. The moment the dentist clamps the pliers onto the tooth, the band strikes up a crescendo. The drum beats furiously. The trumpet wails. The cymbals crash. Why? To drown out the screaming? It is a practical, if horrifying, solution. If the crowd hears the patient shrieking in agony, they might be less inclined to step up and pay their penny. But if all they hear is a festive military march, The violence is sanitized. It becomes a pantomime. The patient opens their mouth, their face contorts, they thrash in the chair, but the sound is swallowed by the music. To the observer at the back of the crowd, it looks almost comedic. It looks like a silent film performance of pain. Historians and sociologists still argue about the nature of this viewership. Was it pure sadism? Was it Schadenfreude, the German term for taking pleasure in the misfortune of others? There is certainly an element of that. There is a deep, primal relief in watching someone else suffer and thinking, thank God that isn't me. It is the same impulse that makes us slow down to look at a car accident or watch compilation videos of people falling off skateboards. We are wired to pay attention to danger, and in the Victorian era, the dentist is a very dangerous creature. But there is also a communal aspect to it. In a world where pain is constant and unavoidable, sharing it makes it bearable. The crowd isn't just mocking the patient. They are validating him. They are witnesses to his trial. When the tooth finally comes out, usually held aloft by the dentist, like the head of a defeated enemy, the crowd erupts. They cheer, they clap. It is a moment of triumph. The patient, spitting blood and dazed by the trauma, is suddenly the hero of the hour. Back in Mr. Grindle's shop, the audience is smaller, but the dynamic is the same. The other customers waiting on the bench are watching you intently. They are leaning forward, studying your reaction to the tooth key. They are comparing your screams to their own internal pain scale. He took that well, an old man might mutter to his wife as you sit there trembling in shock. Better than the blacksmith's boy last week. He fainted. It is a performance review. You are being graded on your stoicism. This public nature of dentistry adds a layer of psychological pressure that we can scarcely imagine today. You aren't just fighting the pain, you are fighting the humiliation. You have to be brave. You have to keep a stiff upper lip, even as that lip is being torn by iron tools. To scream, to cry, to beg for mercy, that is to lose face in front of your neighbors. In a small Victorian village, everyone knows everyone. If you act like a coward in the dentist's chair, the story will be retold at the local tavern by sunset. Did you hear about young Thomas? Cried like a baby when Grindle showed him the pliers. So you sit still. You grip the armrests. You let the tears leak silently from your eyes, but you try to keep your voice down. You are performing for the gallery. Mr. Grindle, for his part, enjoys the audience. It is free advertising. If he can extract a tooth quickly and cleanly while the neighbors are watching, his reputation grows. He might even flourish the tooth for the benefit of the kids at the window, wiping the blood off on his apron with a theatrical gesture. A big one, he announces, tossing it into the bowl. The kids gasp. The woman with the turnips nods approvingly. The transaction is complete. You are no longer a person in pain. You are a satisfied customer, a survivor, and a brief source of entertainment for a bored populace. The boundaries between medical treatment and street theater have completely dissolved. You realize that in this era, the body is public property. Your pain is a commodity. And as you stand up, shaky on your legs, spitting into a handkerchief, you feel the eyes of the room following you. You are not the main character of a tragedy. You are just the opening act for the woman with the shawl, who is now standing up, looking terrified, ready to take your place in the spotlight. The show must go on. Now imagine for a moment that you could simply skip the horror. Imagine if there was a magic button you could press that would fast forward you through the pliers, the key, and the cracking bone, depositing you safely on the other side with a gap in your gum and no memory of how it got there. For centuries, this was the ultimate human fantasy. It was the holy grail of medicine, and for centuries, it was impossible, until suddenly, it wasn't. We have arrived at the mid-19th century's most earth-shattering plot twist, the discovery of anesthesia. Before the 1840s, surgery was a sprint. The skill of a surgeon or a dentist was measured almost exclusively by their speed. A good leg amputation took 30 seconds. A good tooth extraction took 5. Speed was the only mercy available because time was literally agony. But then, a few enterprising souls in America and Britain began tinkering with a clear, volatile liquid called ether, and later, a sweet-smelling compound called chloroform. They discovered that if you inhaled the vapors of these chemicals, something miraculous happened. You didn't just get drunk. You didn't just get groggy. You vanished. You fell into a deep, insensible sleep where the body simply forgot to feel pain. News of this discovery swept through the Victorian world like wildfire. It was hailed as the victory over pain. It was a chemical prayer answered. For the first time in human history, you could lie down on a table, breathe in a sweet, sickly fume, and wake up fixed. It was the closest thing to actual magic that science had ever produced. So let's go back to Mr. Grindle's chair. But this time, the year is slightly later, perhaps 1847 or 1848. The setting is the same. The dirty window, the sheep shears on the wall, the smell of old shoes. But there is a new scent in the air. It cuts through the tobacco smoke and the damp wool. It is a sharp, aggressively sweet odor, chemical and cloying, like rotting fruit mixed with industrial solvent. Mr. Grinnell holds up a glass bottle. The liquid inside is clear, innocent looking. A new trick, he says, with a grin that is meant to be reassuring, but just looks conspiratorial. The lethion, the sweet vitriol. One whiff of this, and you'll be dancing with the angels while I do the work. He doesn't have a calibrated vaporizer. He doesn't have a mask with a safety valve. He has a rag, or perhaps a sponge. He pours the liquid onto the sponge. The smell intensifies instantly, filling the small room. It makes your eyes water. It hits the back of your throat with a cold, stinging sensation. Breathe deep, he commands, and he clamps the sponge over your nose and mouth. This is the moment of surrender. In the modern world, going under anesthesia is a controlled descent. You count backward from 10, and usually you don't make it past 7. It feels like a computer powering down, but inhaling raw ether from a rag in a Victorian cobbler's shop is a more violent affair. Your first instinct is to panic. The vapor burns your lungs. You want to cough, to gag, to push the hand away. It feels less like medicine and more like suffocation. Your heart hammers against your ribs, a desperate, frantic rhythm. Mr. Grindle holds you down. Keep breathing, he insists. It'll pass. And then the edges of the world begin to dissolve. The first thing to go is your sense of distance. The room seems to stretch out, the walls receding into an infinite tunnel. Mr. Grindle's face, looming over you, becomes blurry and indistinct, like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. The sounds of the street, the horses, the shouting vendors, begin to sound metallic and distant, as if they are coming to you through a long brass pipe. Then comes the buzzing. Victorians often described a loud, rushing sound in their ears, like the noise of a steam train or a swarm of bees. It grows louder and louder, drowning out your own thoughts. Your limbs feel heavy, as if your blood has turned to mercury. You try to lift your hand to signal that you've changed your mind, that you'd rather keep the toothache, but your arm refuses to obey. It feels like it belongs to someone else, a heavy object resting on the armrest. This is the chemical oblivion. It is a profound, heavy curtain falling over your consciousness. You feel a strange tingling in your toes and fingers, a numbness that creeps inward toward your core, and then nothing. You are gone. You have exited the chat. You have stepped out of time. For the dentist, this is a revolution. For the first time, the patient is not screaming. The patient is not thrashing. The patient is a limp, pliable doll. Mr. Grindle can take his time. He doesn't have to rush the key. He doesn't have to worry about you biting his fingers. He can work with a leisurely precision that was previously impossible. However, the arrival of this miracle wasn't without its controversy. In fact, it sparked a fierce philosophical and theological debate that historians still find fascinating. You see, the Victorian mindset was deeply rooted in the idea that pain served a purpose. It was a warning system. It was a test of character. And for many religious traditionalists, it was a divine mandate. There were sermons preached from pulpits across England denouncing anesthesia as unnatural. They argued that pain was God's will. Specifically, they quoted scripture about suffering. If you bypass the suffering, are you cheating God? Are you robbing the soul of a necessary trial? This debate was particularly intense regarding childbirth, but it spilled over into dentistry and surgery too. Pain was seen as the vital spark. To extinguish it artificially was to tamper with the forces of life and death. Some doctors even argued that the pain was necessary for healing, that the shock to the system was what kick-started the recovery process. They worried that without the scream, the body wouldn't know it had been injured, and therefore wouldn't bother to heal. It sounds absurd to us now, like arguing that you shouldn't use an umbrella because getting wet is part of the rain's plan. But at the time, it was a serious moral dilemma. People were genuinely afraid that if they went to sleep under the ether, they might lose a piece of their soul along with their tooth. But eventually, the sheer, undeniable luxury of not hurting won the argument. The turning point for the public acceptance of anesthesia came from the very top of the social pyramid. When Queen Victoria herself accepted chloroform for the birth of her 8th child, Prince Leopold, in 1853, the debate effectively ended. If the Queen could use the blessed chloroform, then surely it was good enough for a blacksmith with a bad molar. The Queen's anesthesia became the gold standard. So back in the chair, you drift in the void. You are floating in a dark, starless space. There is no time here. It could be a minute. It could be a century. You are completely disconnected from the biology of your own body. The nerves in your jaw are firing wild distress signals: help, intruder, trauma. But the phone line to your brain has been cut. The messages are screaming into a void, unheard. It feels like a form of time travel. You have cheated the timeline. You have skipped the bad part of the movie. Slowly, the world begins to reassemble itself. The darkness lifts. The buzzing in your ears fades into a dull hum. You feel a heavy, throbbing sensation in your jaw, but it feels distant, like a memory of pain rather than the pain itself. You blink your eyes open. The gaslight is blinding. The smell of the ether is still thick in your nose, making you feel nauseous and dizzy. Mr. Grindle is wiping his hands on his apron. The bowl next to you contains the tooth. All done, he says, his voice sounding like it's coming from underwater. Didn't feel a thing, did you? You try to nod, but your head feels like a balloon filled with lead. You are groggy. You are confused. You feel as though you have been asleep for a week. But he is right. You didn't feel the crack. You didn't feel the tear. You missed the entire show. It feels like a miracle. You want to weep with gratitude. You want to kiss the dirty bottle of ether. You have survived the nightmare of Victorian dentistry without actually experiencing it. But as you stumble out of the chair, leaning heavily on the wall for support, your brain foggy and your coordination shot, you are unaware of the dark side of this miracle. You see, Mr. Grindle isn't a chemist. He isn't an anesthesiologist. He is a man who fixes shoes, and he has just administered a highly potent, potentially lethal chemical agent to you using a guess and a dirty sponge. The miracle of ether has a very thin line separating it from the tragedy of overdose. And in the unregulated Wild West of Victorian medicine, that line is crossed with terrifying frequency. You woke up this time. But as we are about to see, waking up was never a guarantee. You have just woken up from your ether-induced nap, groggy and drooling, minus one tooth. You feel a profound sense of relief. You think you have cheated the system. You think you have bypassed the primal horror of the extraction. But here is the cold, hard truth that you, in your dizzy post-operative haze, do not realize. You have just survived a game of Russian roulette played with a chemical sponge. In the mid-Victorian era, anesthesia is not a science. It is an art form, and unfortunately, the artist is a man who usually repairs boot heels for a living. We need to talk about the dosage problem. In a modern hospital, an anesthesiologist is a highly trained specialist who spent years in medical school learning exactly how much chemical agent is required to keep you asleep without actually killing you. They factor in your weight, your age, your medical history, and probably your astrological sign. They monitor your heart rate, your oxygen levels, and your blood pressure every single second. Mr. Grindle has none of that. He has a bottle and a rag. His method of administration is scientifically known as the pour until they stop wriggling technique. He looks at you. If you are a big, burly dock worker, he pours a lot. If you are a small, frail seamstress, he pours, well, probably also a lot, just to be safe. There is no scale. There is no metering device. It is pure guesswork. It is like trying to refuel a jet plane by throwing buckets of kerosene at it while blindfolded. This makes every anesthesia session a terrifying gamble. You are walking a razor-thin tightrope. On one side is the horror of waking up too soon. On the other side is the tragedy of never waking up at all. And right in the middle is a strange, chaotic zone known as the excitement stage. Let's look at that middle zone first, because it is the source of many Victorian dental disasters. You might assume that breathing in ether or chloroform sends you straight to dreamland, but biology is rarely that cooperative. Before you hit the deep surgical sleep, your brain often passes through a phase of paradoxical stimulation. You are unconscious, yes, but your body goes into fight or flight mode. You become a sleeping berserker. Imagine the scene. Mr. Grindle puts the rag over your face. You breathe in. Your eyes roll back. He thinks you are under. He reaches for the pliers, but suddenly your body revolts. You, who are technically asleep, start to thrash. You kick out. You swing your fists. You might even unleash a stream of profanity that would make a sailor blush despite being a respectable church-going citizen. This is the excitement stage. The inhibitory centers of your brain have been shut off, but the motor centers are still firing wild, random signals. You are a zombie. Now remember the setting. You are in a small shop filled with sharp tools, glass bottles, and open flames. A thrashing patient is a wrecking ball. There are accounts of patients kicking over tables, smashing windows, and even punching the dentist in the face, all while completely comatose. Mr. Grindle, anticipating this, likely has an assistant, or just a strong local lad he paid a penny, standing by specifically to hold you down. It turns the medical procedure into a wrestling match. The goal is to pin the sleeping patient to the chair long enough to rip the tooth out before they wake up and realize they are fighting a cobbler. But the excitement stage is just a nuisance. The real danger lies in the timing. Let's consider the scenario where Mr. Grindle is a bit stingy with the ether. He gives you just enough to make you woozy, but not enough to knock you out completely. Or perhaps he takes the rag away too soon, you drift off, the world fades, and then, right at the moment the cold steel of the tooth key clamps onto your jaw, you wake up. But you don't fully wake up. You enter a state of anesthesia awareness. Your body is heavy, paralyzed by the residual chemicals. You cannot move your arms to push him away. You cannot open your mouth to scream. You are trapped in your own flesh, a silent prisoner. But your pain receptors, they are wide awake. You feel everything. You feel the metal, the pressure, the crack of the bone. You feel the agony with crystal clarity, but you are unable to signal your distress. To Mr. Grindle, you look peaceful. You are sitting still because you are paralyzed. He thinks he is doing a great job. Look at him, he might say to the audience at the window, quiet as a mouse. Meanwhile, inside your head, you are screaming into the void, experiencing a nightmare that no amount of therapy will ever fix. This is the betrayal of the miracle. It promised oblivion, but it delivered a front row seat to your own torture, minus the ability to complain. Now let's look at the other side of the coin, the overdose. Mr. Grindle, perhaps having had a patient wake up screaming last week, decides not to take any chances with you. He pours the chloroform liberally. He soaks the sponge. He holds it over your nose and mouth firmly, ignoring your initial coughs. He waits until you are thoroughly, deeply limp. The problem is that chloroform, while effective, is also toxic to the heart. It can cause something called cardiac sensitization. In simple terms, it makes your heart muscle incredibly twitchy and unstable. You drift off. The surgery begins. But then, your body experiences the shock of the extraction, the sudden violence of the tooth being ripped from the nerve. Even though you are asleep, your nervous system registers the trauma. It sends a jolt of adrenaline to your heart. Under normal circumstances, your heart would just beat faster. But sensitized by the chloroform, your heart doesn't speed up. It panics. It goes into ventricular fibrillation. Instead of beating, it just quivers like a bag of worms. You stop breathing. Your face goes from flushed to pale, and then to a terrifying shade of blue. Mr. Grindle is busy admiring the tooth he just pulled. He is wiping the blood off his pliers. He doesn't notice immediately that the rhythmic wheezing sound of your breathing has stopped. He turns back to the chair to tell you the good news, and he finds you slumped over, silent. "Hello?" he says, tapping your cheek. "Wakey, wakey." But you do not wakey. The first recorded death from chloroform happened in 1848 to a 15-year-old girl named Hannah Greener. She was having a toenail removed, a minor procedure. She inhaled the vapor, fell asleep, and never woke up. Her heart simply stopped. This sent a shockwave through the medical community, but it didn't stop the use of the drug. It just added a layer of grim suspense to every surgery. In Mr. Grindle's shop, there is no defibrillator. There is no epinephrine. If your heart stops, his resuscitation techniques are primitive. He might slap your face. He might throw cold water on you. He might, and this was a real technique, try to stimulate you by shouting loudly in your ear. "Don't die," he yells. "That's bad for business." If those advanced medical interventions fail, that's it. You have become a statistic. You came in for a toothache and you left in a wooden box. This is the deadly gamble. Every time you sit in that chair and take a breath of the sweet vitriol, you are rolling the dice. You are trusting a man who measures liquid by the glug to navigate the complex biochemistry of your central nervous system. You are betting your life against a molar. Historians often point out the dark irony here. In the days before anesthesia, patients died from the shock of the pain or from later infections. With anesthesia, they died from the cure. The death rate didn't necessarily drop immediately. The cause of death just shifted. Instead of dying from exhaustion due to pain, people died from syncope due to chloroform. And yet, despite the risks, despite the stories of people turning blue and dropping dead, the waiting room is full. Why? Because the fear of pain is the strongest force in human nature. The memory of the toothache, the sleepless nights, the throbbing madness is so fresh, so visceral, that you are willing to risk death just to avoid feeling it again. You look at the bottle in Mr. Grindle's hand. It looks innocent enough, clear liquid, but it is the most dangerous thing in the room, more dangerous than the rusty pliers, more dangerous than the infectious bacteria. It is a bottle of silence, and as he pours it onto the sponge, you close your eyes and hope that today the silence is only temporary. You have survived the waiting room, the dirty pliers, and the biological roulette of the dosage. You are sitting in the chair, heavy with the chemical sleep of ether, drifting in that strange, buzzing void. You are safe from pain, but you are not safe from physics. We have talked about the biological dangers of the Victorian dental surgery, the germs, the heart attacks, the suffocations. But there is another danger, one that is purely elemental. It turns out that turning a small, enclosed room into a cloud of highly volatile gas is a recipe for disaster, especially when the only way to see what you are doing is by setting things on fire. Welcome to the explosive reality of Victorian lighting. To understand why your dental appointment might end in a fireball, you have to look at the environment. It is the mid-19th century. The electric light bulb is still just a glimmer in the future. If you want light, you need a flame. Mr. Grindle's shop is likely lit by one of two things, candles or gas. If he's a bit old-fashioned or particularly cheap, he might have a tallow candle perched on a shelf, sputtering and dripping hot grease. But if he is a modern man, a man of progress, he has gas lighting. Gaslight is the defining glow of the Victorian era. It is that sickly, yellowish-green light that hisses softly from brass fixtures on the wall. It casts long, wavering shadows that make the room feel alive. It smells faintly of sulfur, but most importantly, it is an open flame. There is no glass bulb, no vacuum seal. It is a jet of burning gas dancing in the open air, hungry for oxygen. Now let's introduce the ether. Ether is a miracle drug, yes. But chemically speaking, it is also a nightmare. It is incredibly volatile, meaning it wants to turn from a liquid into a gas at the slightest provocation. It evaporates rapidly at room temperature, and here's the kicker: ether vapor is heavier than air. When Mr. Grindle pours that liquid onto the sponge over your face, he isn't just anesthetizing you. He is creating a dense, invisible fog. This fog doesn't just dissipate into the ceiling. It sinks. It spills off the sponge, rolls down your cheeks, cascades over your shoulders, and pools on the floor around the chair. It flows like an invisible river, silent and deadly, filling the lower half of the room with a highly combustible atmosphere. Imagine the scene. You are asleep. Mr. Grindle is leaning over you. He needs to see into the dark cavern of your mouth to find the root of the problem. But the gas lamp on the wall is too far away. The shadows are too deep. So what does he do? He brings the light closer. He might pick up a candle, or he might adjust a movable gas arm, swinging the hissing flame down so it hovers just a few feet from your face. He is focusing on your tooth. He is not thinking about the invisible cloud of ether vapor that has been steadily building up around your body for the last 5 minutes. He is essentially holding a lit match inside a fuel tank. The physics of what happens next are terrifyingly simple. The ether vapor is searching for an ignition source. It expands outward, creeping along the floor, swirling in the drafts. Eventually, a tendril of this gas reaches the flame. It doesn't necessarily explode like a stick of dynamite. It isn't a Hollywood blockbuster explosion that blows the roof off. It is a flash fire. The flame catches the vapor stream and travels backward, tracing the path of the gas instantly. It moves faster than the eye can follow. It zippers through the air, a streak of blue and orange fire, heading straight back to the source. And the source, unfortunately, is your face. There are numerous recorded incidents in medical journals of the time describing this exact scenario. It was a known occupational hazard, the flash, as it was sometimes called. One moment, the surgery is calm and quiet, filled with the heavy, sweet scent of the drug. The next, the room lights up with a whoosh of ignited gas. The sponge on your face catches fire. The vapor hovering around your head ignites. Mr. Grindle's apron, stained with flammable oils and waxes, might catch a spark. Suddenly, the dental extraction has turned into a frantic attempt to put out a human bonfire. Mr. Grindle drops the pliers. He grabs a blanket, hopefully not a wool one soaked in oil, and starts beating the flames out. You, meanwhile, are still under the influence. You might feel a sudden intense heat, but your brain is too scrambled to process it as danger. You might dream you are sunbathing on a very hot beach, or that you have stuck your head into a baker's oven. If you are lucky, the fire consumes the vapor quickly and burns itself out, leaving you with singed eyebrows, a blackened nose, and a very distinct smell of burnt hair mixing with the ether. If you are unlucky, the fire travels back to the bottle of ether that Mr. Grindle left uncorked on the table. That is when the real explosion happens. That is when the windows blow out. This danger was so prevalent that medical textbooks of the era actually contained warnings about the geometry of lighting. They advised dentists to keep the ether bottle below the level of the gas flame, knowing that the heavy gas would sink. It was a game of vertical spacing. Keep the explosive gas near the floor and the fire near the ceiling, and hope they don't meet in the middle. It adds a layer of slapstick absurdity to the horror. Imagine waking up from your surgery. Your tooth is gone, which is great. But you also have no eyelashes, your collar is scorched, and Mr. Grindle is stamping out a small fire in the corner of the room while looking sheepish. "Small mishap with the lamp," he mutters, wiping soot from his forehead. "Nothing to worry about." Builds character. This flammability was actually one of the main reasons why chloroform eventually became more popular than ether in Britain, despite the fact that chloroform was more toxic to the heart. It was a grim trade-off. The doctors had a choice. Do we use the drug that might stop the patient's heart, chloroform, or the drug that might set the patient on fire, ether? Queen Victoria chose chloroform, and honestly, looking at the fire hazard, you can see why. Cardiac arrest is tragic, but at least it's tidy. Exploding in the middle of a medical procedure is just embarrassing. But Mr. Grindle, your cobbler dentist, might not have access to the expensive, unstable chloroform. Ether is cheap. It's easy to make, so he sticks with the flammable stuff. As you sit there in the chair, oblivious to the world, you are the center of a volatile chemical equation. The air around you is shimmering with potential energy. Every time Mr. Grindle moves the candle closer to get a better look at your molar, he is rolling the dice. He is playing chicken with thermodynamics. The warmth of the room takes on a sinister meaning. It isn't just the cozy heat of the hearth. It is the latent heat of combustion waiting for a spark. And as the gas jet hisses on the wall, sounding like a snake ready to strike, it is a reminder that in the Victorian era, even the air in the room is trying to kill you. You survive the fire hazard today, mostly by luck. The draft from the door blew the vapor away from the candle, or perhaps Mr. Grindle kept the flame just high enough to avoid the flash zone. The surgery proceeds. The tooth is out. You are not on fire. But as you begin to stir, coughing the sweet fumes out of your lungs, you are entering the final phase of this ordeal. The tooth is gone, but the gap remains. And now, we have to talk about what happens to that gap. Because in the world of Victorian dentistry, you don't just leave a hole, you have to fill it. And the things they use to fill it are just as horrifying as the things they use to make it. So, the tooth is gone. Mr. Grindle has successfully wrenched the offender from your jaw, possibly set the room on fire, and you are now the proud owner of a ragged, bleeding gap in your gum line. The pain is subsiding into a dull, rhythmic throb, and the ether fog is lifting. But as you run your tongue over the empty space, a new kind of panic sets in. It isn't physical pain this time, it is social terror. In the Victorian era, your smile is your resume. It is the primary indicator of your health, your wealth, and your moral standing. A full set of white teeth implies that you have a good diet, good hygiene, and the discipline to avoid the gin bottle, even if that's a lie. A gap, on the other hand, suggests poverty. It suggests decay. It suggests that you are a person who lets things, specifically your own skeleton, fall apart. You cannot go to the ball with a gap. You cannot secure a favorable marriage contract with a gap. You need to fill the void. You need false teeth. But in the 1850s, false teeth is a phrase that covers a terrifying spectrum of materials. If you are poor, you simply live with the gap. Your face slowly collapses inward as the bone reabsorbs, giving you that classic nutcracker chin profile of the elderly Victorian peasant. But you have a few shillings. You have aspirations. You want a denture. Your first option is ivory. Mr. Grindle might offer you a set carved from the tusk of a hippopotamus, a walrus, or an elephant. Hippopotamus ivory is the most popular because the enamel is thick and hard. It sounds exotic, doesn't it? I'm wearing hippopotamus. It sounds like something you'd brag about at a dinner party. But here's the reality of organic dentures. Ivory is porous. It is dead biological material. When you put it in your mouth, a warm, wet environment full of bacteria and leftover mutton stew, it reacts. It begins to rot. Within a few months, your expensive hippopotamus teeth will turn a sickly brownish-black color. But the color is the least of your worries. The smell is the real problem. The ivory absorbs the odors of everything you eat and drink, and then adds its own scent of slow decay. Victorian diaries are full of polite complaints about the putrid breath of the upper classes. When a wealthy dowager leans in to whisper a secret at a ball, the smell wafting from her mouth is often described as cadaverous, because essentially she has a rotting piece of a dead animal strapped to her gums. You decline the hippo. Your next option is porcelain. The French have been experimenting with mineral teeth. They are clean, they don't rot, and they stay pearly white. Perfect, right? Wrong. Early porcelain is too white. It looks like opaque chiclets. It doesn't reflect light like natural enamel. It looks dead. Furthermore, it is brittle. If you bite down too hard on a piece of crusty bread, your teeth might shatter like a teacup. And the sound. When you clack your porcelain teeth together, it makes a high-pitched china shop noise that sets everyone's nerves on edge. So you want the best. You want the gold standard. You want teeth that look real, feel real, and last a lifetime. And logically, the only thing that looks exactly like a human tooth is a human tooth. This brings us to the darkest, most macabre chapter of dental history, the trade in Waterloo teeth. The demand for real human teeth in the 19th century was insatiable. Dentists needed matched sets, upper and lower incisors that looked good together. But where do you get them? Initially, they came from the resurrectionists, the grave robbers. These men would dig up fresh corpses, smash the jaws open, and steal the teeth before selling the body to the medical schools for dissection. But grave teeth were often old. They were decayed. They belonged to people who had died of disease. They weren't premium quality. The market wanted healthy teeth, young teeth, teeth that had never known sugar or pipe smoke. And the best place to find thousands of healthy young men dead in one place? A battlefield. The Battle of Waterloo in 1815 was a tragedy for Europe, but it was a bonanza for dentistry. Nearly 50,000 men fell that day. French, British, Prussian. Young soldiers in the prime of their lives, most of whom had perfect teeth because they died before they were old enough to develop rot. As night fell over the battlefield and the cannons finally went silent, a different kind of army moved in. They weren't soldiers. They were scavengers, locals, camp followers, and even some of the surviving troops, moving through the smoke and the carnage with pliers in their hands. It is a scene from a nightmare. Imagine the moonlight reflecting off the brass buttons of the fallen uniforms. The scavengers moving from body to body, prying open the jaws of the dead, heroes and villains alike, and ripping out their front teeth. They didn't take the molars. Nobody sees the molars. They took the incisors and the canines, the smile teeth. They filled pockets, pouches, and even barrels with these teeth. They were sorted by size and shade, then shipped back to London by the crate load. The influx was so massive that it crashed the market price of dentures, making high-quality teeth affordable for the middle class for the first time. These teeth became known as Waterloo teeth. The name stuck. It became a brand. Even decades later, long after the actual supply from Waterloo had run out, dentists would still advertise Waterloo teeth to imply quality. It was like saying Egyptian cotton or Italian leather. It meant teeth from a young, healthy soldier who died violently. Later, the trade continued with the Crimean War and the American Civil War. Barrels of teeth were shipped across the Atlantic. It was a global supply chain built on slaughter. So Mr. Grindle opens a small velvet-lined drawer. He pulls out a set of dentures. The base is made of ivory or perhaps vulcanite, hard rubber, but the teeth themselves are real. They are slightly yellowed but strong. They have the natural translucency that porcelain lacks. A fine set, he says, very spirited. He fits them into your mouth. They are held in place by metal springs. That's right, springs. Victorian dentures didn't rely on suction like modern ones. They had coiled gold springs at the back that constantly pushed the upper and lower plates apart. This meant you had to actively use your jaw muscles to keep your mouth closed. If you relaxed for a second, say if you fell asleep in church or got startled, your mouth would fly open with a mechanical snap. But you look in the mirror, which is probably cracked. You smile. The gap is gone. You look respectable again. But think about what is actually in your mouth. You are wearing the teeth of a stranger. These teeth might have bitten into a hardtack biscuit on the morning of a charge. They might have clenched in fear as the cavalry rode in. They might belong to a French grenadier who shouted "Vive l'Empereur" moments before a musket ball ended his life. There is a profound Gothic intimacy to this. You are chewing your Sunday roast with a dead man's enamel. You are smiling at your children with a ghost's grin. Historians often wonder if the Victorians knew. Did the polite lady sipping tea know that her beautiful smile came from a mass grave? The answer is, mostly, yes. It was an open secret. They knew, and they didn't care. The desire for aesthetic perfection outweighed the squeamishness of the origin. Vanity is a powerful anesthetic. Furthermore, there was a strange superstition that sometimes accompanied these teeth. Some people believed that you could inherit the traits of the donor. If you wore the teeth of a brave soldier, perhaps you would become braver. If you wore the teeth of a criminal, you might feel a sudden urge to steal. It adds a psychological horror to the daily routine of putting your teeth in. But there is a practical horror too. These are real teeth, but they are dead. They have no blood supply. They are brittle, and they are mounted on a base that traps food. The hygiene of Victorian dentures was catastrophic. You couldn't just brush them with minty paste. You had to take them out, scrub them with vinegar or port wine, and try to scrape off the calculus that accumulated. And despite the Waterloo brand, sometimes the supply chain wasn't quite as noble as a battlefield. Sometimes the teeth came from the local hospital's mortuary. Sometimes they came from the poor who sold their own teeth for bread money. A common sight in London was a street placard advertising good prices for live teeth. A desperate person would go in, have a healthy tooth pulled, get paid a few shillings, and that tooth would end up in the mouth of a wealthy banker by the end of the week. It was a literal transfer of vitality from the poor to the rich. So you pay Mr. Grindle. You adjust your jaw against the pressure of the springs. You taste the faint, metallic tang of the gold wire and the lingering, ghostly flavor of the teeth themselves. You have your smile back. You are ready to face society. But as you walk out of the shop, you clamp your mouth shut tight, fighting the springs. You don't want to smile too broadly. You don't want anyone to look too closely and wonder which battle your mouth fought in. You are a walking reliquary, a living tomb for the unknown soldier. And every time you take a bite, the dead bite with you. You have survived the extraction. You have navigated the fire hazards of the ether. You may even be sporting a fashionable new set of dead man's teeth. Now, you return to the sanctuary of your own home. You look in the mirror, perhaps feeling a renewed sense of dedication to your remaining molars. You decide that from now on, you are going to take oral hygiene seriously. You are going to scrub away the worms and the rot before they can claim another victim. It is time to brush your teeth. In the modern world, this is a banal activity. You pick up a piece of plastic engineered by scientists to have the perfect ergonomic grip. You look at the bristles, soft, nylon, rounded at the tips to gently massage your gums. They are sterile. They are bright blue or neon pink. And most importantly, that toothbrush belongs to you. It is a sacred, singular object. If you found your roommate using your toothbrush, you would probably burn it and buy a new one. But in the Victorian household, the toothbrush is a very different beast. And beast is the operative word here because your toothbrush is literally made of a dead animal. You walk over to the washstand. There, sitting in a porcelain mug that has a suspicious ring of grime around the bottom, is the brush. It looks elegant from a distance. The handle is carved from bone or ivory, perhaps with your family initials engraved on it. It feels heavy and cold in your hand. But the business end, the bristles, is the stuff of nightmares. Nylon won't be invented until the late 1930s. So what did the Victorians use? They used hair. Specifically, the coarse, stiff guard hairs taken from the neck of a wild boar. The best bristles were imported from Siberia or northern China. Why? Because boars living in freezing climates grow thicker, tougher coats. So when you brush your teeth, you are essentially scraping your delicate gums with the frozen, wiry fur of an angry Siberian pig. If you were a bit more sensitive or wealthy, you might opt for badger hair. It was softer, yes, but it had a tendency to get soggy. Horsehair was also an option, though it was considered common. But regardless of the animal, the mechanics are the same. These are not synthetic fibers. These are biological tubes. Animal hair is hollow. It has a central canal called the medulla. When you wet a modern nylon brush, the water slides off. When you wet a Victorian boar bristle brush, the water and whatever else is in your mouth is sucked up into the hair shaft via capillary action. Think about that. You wet the brush. You scrub your teeth, dislodging food particles, plaque, and bacteria. You rinse the brush, probably in the same stagnant basin of water you just washed your face in, and put it back in the mug. The brush doesn't dry out. Inside those thousands of hollow bristles, a microscopic ecosystem is thriving. The moisture stays trapped. The bacteria multiply. Mold begins to grow inside the bristles. This brings us to the smell. A modern toothbrush has no scent. A Victorian toothbrush, after a few weeks of use, smells like a wet dog that has been eating old cheese. It has a funky organic musk that you just can't shake. And every morning, you put that musk directly into your mouth. But the horror of the material pales in comparison to the horror of the usage. In the mid-19th century, the concept of individual hygiene items is still a novelty. Towels are often shared, washcloths are communal, and in a terrifying number of households, so is the toothbrush. The family toothbrush is a real and persistent phenomenon of the era. It hangs there in the washroom, a communal tool for the greater good. Father uses it before breakfast to scrub away his tobacco breath. Mother uses it after tea. The children use it before bed, if they are forced to. Imagine the biological relay race happening here. Father has a gum infection. He scrubs his bleeding gums with the boar bristles, loading the hollow hairs with pathogens. An hour later, you walk in, you pick up the damp brush, you scrub your own teeth. You have just successfully inoculated yourself with your father's gingivitis. It is a cross-contamination nightmare. It is like sharing a piece of chewing gum with your entire family every single day for years. Historians often find letters and advice columns from the era where people genuinely ask, is it necessary for each child to have their own brush? The fact that they have to ask is telling. Etiquette books eventually started to suggest that individual brushes were a sign of refinement, But for the working class and even the middle class, a good bone-handled brush was an expense. Why buy 5 when one does the job? And what a job it does. Let's talk about the physical sensation of brushing with a boar. These bristles are not rounded. They are sharp, they are jagged, they were cut with shears, leaving rough edges. Using a fresh boar bristle brush feels less like cleaning and more like sanding. You aren't just removing plaque, you are removing enamel. You are removing gum tissue. The vigorous scrubbing action recommended at the time, scrub hard to stimulate the humors, often led to receding gums. You were literally brushing your teeth away in an attempt to save them. And then there is the issue of shedding, because the bristles are just tufts of hair glued or wired into holes in the bone handle. They have a tendency to fall out. It is a common morning occurrence to be scrubbing away and suddenly feel a stiff, prickly boar hair detach and lodge itself between your teeth. Now you have to floss out the toothbrush itself. Occasionally, a bristle might get stuck in your throat. There are actual medical case studies from the 19th century of doctors having to surgically remove toothbrush bristles from patients' tonsils or intestines. It's the tool that fights back. But let's look at the washstand again. You have your moldy, communal shedding pig hair brush. You wet it with water from the pitcher. And now, you need something to scrub with. You need a cleaning agent. You reach for the pot of dentifrice. You might expect a nice minty paste, but toothpaste in a tube won't be popularized until the 1890s, and even then it's a luxury. What you have is a powder. It sits in a ceramic pot, looking like something you'd use to scour a frying pan. And honestly, the ingredients aren't that different. You dip your wet communal brush directly into the community pot of powder. Think about the double dipping rule at parties. Now apply that to dental hygiene. Your wet brush, teeming with the bacteria from your mouth and your dad's mouth, goes into the powder. The moisture clumps the powder. The bacteria colonize the pot. Over time, the family dentifrice pot becomes a petri dish of the entire household's oral microbiome. It turns into a crusty gray paste at the edges. You load up the brush with this gritty substance. You open your mouth, you prepare to scour, and as you scrub, feeling the sharp bristles and the abrasive grit grinding against your teeth, you take comfort in the fact that you are being clean. You are a modern Victorian. You are fighting the rot. You just don't realize that your weapon of choice is a biological hazard that would make a modern sanitation worker weep. You are scrubbing your teeth with a moldy piece of a dead pig dipped in a jar of family germs. And the worst part? The grit you are using is about to take the enamel right off your bones. You are standing at the washstand, clutching your shedding boar bristle brush, ready to engage in the morning ritual of oral hygiene. You look at the pot of dentifrice sitting on the shelf. In the modern world, we expect our toothpaste to be a smooth, minty fresh gel that foams pleasantly and leaves us feeling like we just inhaled a blizzard. But in the 1850s, cleaning your teeth is not a refreshing experience. It is a construction project. You dip your wet brush into the pot. The powder that clings to the bristles isn't white. It might be a dark, sooty gray, or perhaps a rusty red. It doesn't smell like peppermint. It smells like a fireplace, or perhaps a renovation site. And as you shove the brush into your mouth and begin to scrub, the sensation is immediate and alarming. It feels like you are chewing on sand, because, essentially, you are. The philosophy of Victorian tooth cleaning is based entirely on abrasion. They believed that tartar and stains were like moss growing on a stone wall. The only way to get rid of them was to scrape them off with brute force. So the recipes for tooth powder read less like a list of medical ingredients and more like a supply list for a masonry worker. Let's look at the ingredients list of the powder currently grinding against your molars. First, there is the base, A popular choice is chalk. Not the refined calcium carbonate we use today, but rough, pulverized chalk. If you are a bit more upscale, you might use cuttlefish bone. Yes, the internal shell of a squid-like cephalopod. You dry it out, crush it into a powder, and use it to scour your enamel. It's salty, it's fishy, and it's incredibly scratchy. It is the same stuff you put in a parakeet's cage to help them sharpen their beaks. Now imagine sharpening your gums with it, but if you are poor, or if you simply believe in hardier methods, your dentifrice might contain brick dust. This is exactly what it sounds like. You take a red brick, you smash it with a hammer until it turns into a fine red powder. You put that powder in your mouth. The logic is simple. Brick is hard, tartar is soft. The brick wins. The problem, of course, is that enamel, while hard, is not invincible. By scrubbing your teeth with brick dust every morning, you are effectively sanding down your teeth like a piece of carpentry. You are removing the stains, yes, but you are also removing the tooth itself. Then there is the charcoal. Charcoal tooth powder was all the rage in the 19th century, a trend that, oddly enough, has returned in the 21st century. The Victorians loved it because it was antiseptic and it absorbed bad odors. But imagine the visual. You are standing in your nightgown, your mouth filled with black sludge, looking like you just tried to eat a lit cigar. You scrub and scrub, turning your entire mouth into a coal chute, and then rinse. The theory is that the contrast makes your teeth look whiter afterward. The reality is that the grit gets stuck in your gums, leaving you with a permanent tattoo-like gray line along the gingiva. But mere cleanliness isn't enough for you. You are a Victorian of status. You don't just want clean teeth, you want white teeth. The obsession with the pearl white smile is reaching a fever pitch in this era, and part of this is driven by the contrast with the industrial grime of the cities. In a world covered in soot, a white smile is a beacon of purity. But there is a darker, stranger aesthetic at play too. Historians still argue about the influence of consumption, tuberculosis, on beauty standards. The consumptive look, pale skin, bright eyes, red lips, and translucent white teeth, was tragically fashionable. To look slightly sickly was to look delicate and aristocratic. So how do you achieve that blinding white smile if your teeth are naturally yellowing from tea, tobacco, and age? You turn to chemistry, and this is where the bathroom turns into a toxic waste dump. You might try the acid method. Some beauty manuals of the time recommend rubbing your teeth with a solution of tartaric acid or even dilute sulfuric acid. The acid eats away the outer layer of stained enamel, revealing the fresh, white prism underneath. It works instantly. Your teeth look brilliant. The catch? You are dissolving your teeth. It's like cleaning your windows by melting the glass. After a few treatments, your enamel becomes paper thin. Your teeth become incredibly sensitive to hot and cold, and eventually they just crumble away, leaving you with little black stumps. But for that one glorious week, you had the best smile at the opera. If the acid is too slow for you, you move on to the heavy hitter, lead. Lead is the darling of Victorian cosmetics. Women paint their faces with lead-based Venetian ceruse to look pale, and inevitably, someone had the bright idea to apply it to teeth. There were tooth enamels and whitening paints sold that contained lead. They coated the tooth in a thick, opaque white layer, covering up any rot or decay. It was essentially correction fluid for your mouth. You paint it on. It tastes sweet. Lead has a naturally sweet flavor, which is why children often ate lead paint chips. It feels smooth. Your smile is instantly transformed from a jagged row of tombstones into a pristine white picket fence. But then, the chronic poisoning sets in. Lead is a neurotoxin. It doesn't just stay on your teeth. It leaches into your saliva. You swallow it, it enters your bloodstream. Slowly, over months of vanity, you begin to feel the effects. You get headaches, you feel confused, your stomach cramps, you start to lose the ability to lift your wrists, a condition known as wrist drop. And then, in a cruel twist of irony, the lead turns on your mouth. One of the classic signs of lead poisoning is the Victorian line, a thin, blue-black line that appears on the gums, right where they meet the teeth. So you used the lead to make your smile white, but it ended up giving you a blue smile and brain damage. There is a fringe tidbit from the era involving a specific recipe found in a housewife's journal that combined crushed cuttlefish, cream of tartar, and burnt bread. Burnt bread, essentially carbon, was a cheap alternative to charcoal. Imagine the morning routine of burning your toast on purpose, scraping off the black char, mixing it with squid bones, and scrubbing your teeth with it. It's a culinary disaster repurposed as hygiene. But you, standing at the washstand, don't know about the neurotoxicity. You don't know about the enamel erosion. You only know what the advertisements tell you. You see the bloom of youth tooth powder in the shop window, promising a smile that will dazzle the suitors. You rinse your mouth, spitting out a slurry of brick dust and saliva. You run your tongue over your teeth. They feel smooth, mostly because you have sanded them down. They look white, mostly because you have bleached them with acid. You smile at yourself in the mirror. You look healthy. You look wealthy. You look like a person who can afford the best brick dust money can buy. But deep down, you feel a little queasy. Maybe it was the mutton from last night. Maybe it's the damp air. Or maybe, just maybe, it's the gram of lead you just ingested with your breakfast tea. You put the lid back on the toxic pot. You rinse the boar brush, but not too well, gotta keep those germs alive. And you head out into the world, your smile bright, your breath smelling faintly of wet pig and charcoal, ready to face the day. You are a masterpiece of Victorian cosmetic engineering, painted, sanded, and slowly dying for the sake of appearances. The year is moving forward. The calendar on the wall of the shop has turned, and with it, the entire atmosphere of the street outside is shifting. We are leaving the chaotic, unregulated Wild West of the early Victorian era and entering the age of organization, classification, and, dare we say it, respectability. You are walking down the street, nursing a slight ache in your jaws, a phantom pain perhaps, from your previous adventures with Mr. Grindle, when you notice a new sign swinging above a doorway. It doesn't feature a painted tooth. It doesn't have a string of bloody molars hanging in the window. It is a polished brass plaque, engraved with elegant script, Mr. Arthur P. Sterling, Surgeon Dentist. You stop. Surgeon Dentist? It sounds fancy. It sounds expensive. It sounds like a man who definitely does not shoe horses on the weekends. This is the birth of the professional. For decades, dentistry was the bastard child of medicine. Physicians looked down on it as manual labor. Surgeons looked down on it as a trade. It was something you did with your hands, like plumbing or carpentry, and therefore it was beneath the dignity of a university-educated gentleman. But slowly, inevitably, the tide began to turn. The sheer volume of suffering and the growing realization that pulling the wrong tooth could actually kill someone pushed for reform. The change didn't happen overnight, but it was driven by a new breed of practitioner who was tired of being lumped in with the village idiot. These men wanted status. They wanted to be invited to the dinner parties where the doctors and lawyers ate. They wanted to separate the profession of dental surgery from the trade of mechanical dentistry. This distinction is crucial. In the old days, mechanical dentistry, making dentures, was the moneymaker. It was a craft. Operative dentistry, filling and extracting, was the dirty work. But the new professionals argued that understanding the anatomy of the head, the pathology of disease, and the chemistry of materials was a science. They started to demand training. Imagine the shock to the system. Previously, to become a dentist, you just apprenticed with someone like Mr. Grindle. You watched him pull a few teeth, you swept the floor, you learned how to mix the plaster for the molds, and after a few years, he gave you a pat on the back and a pair of pliers, and off you went. Finding teeth, extracting teeth. That was the curriculum. Now suddenly, there is talk of curriculum. There is talk of exams. In 1858, the Dental Hospital of London opened its doors. It was a place where students could actually learn dentistry on patients, under supervision, rather than just experimenting on the poor in a back alley. A year later, the Royal College of Surgeons, finally, grudgingly, agreed to grant a license in dental surgery. It wasn't a full medical degree yet, but it was a piece of paper with a royal stamp. But nothing legitimizes a profession quite like a royal endorsement. Enter Queen Victoria. The Queen, as we have established, was a woman of strong opinions and very specific needs. She had suffered from dental issues, like everyone else in her sugary empire, and she required care. But the Queen of England cannot simply pop down to the local barber shop and sit on a barrel. She needs a specialist. Her choice fell upon a man named Edwin Saunders. Saunders wasn't a rough-and-tumble tooth drawer. He was a gentleman. He was articulate, skilled, and discreet. He served the royal family for decades, managing the Queen's dental health with a level of finesse that Mr. Grindle couldn't even dream of. And then, the impossible happened. In 1883, Queen Victoria knighted him. Sir Edwin Saunders, a dentist, a knight. The impact of this cannot be overstated. It sent a shockwave through the social fabric of Britain. Before this, a dentist was a tradesman, someone you paid at the back door. Now, a dentist was a sir. He was a member of the establishment. He was someone you could introduce to your mother without shame. This royal seal of approval changed the architecture of the dental office. You step inside Mr. Sterling's practice, and the difference is immediate. The smell of old shoes and sheep manure is gone. It has been replaced by the scent of beeswax polish, lavender, and the faint, sharp tang of carbolic acid, the new smell of clean. The room is carpeted. There are heavy velvet drapes to muffle the sound of the street. And in the center of the room sits the throne, the dental chair. Gone is the wooden kitchen chair with the leather straps. In its place is a marvel of Victorian engineering. It is upholstered in plush red velvet. It has an adjustable headrest. It has a foot pedal that allows the dentist to pump you up and down hydraulically. It tilts back. It is a machine designed for access, yes, but also for comfort, or at least the illusion of it. Mr. Sterling himself is a study in contrast to Mr. Grindle. He wears a frock coat, a crisp white collar, and spectacles. He has clean hands, soft, manicured hands that smell of soap. He speaks to you in Latin terms. He talks of caries instead of rot. He talks of alveolar abscesses instead of gum boils. He is selling you a narrative of science. He is telling you that your mouth is not a chaotic cave of worms, but a biological system that can be managed, repaired, and preserved. This is the era where the philosophy shifts from extraction to preservation. For centuries, the only cure for a bad tooth was to remove it. But the new professionals are obsessed with saving the tooth. They are experimenting with fillings. They are using gold foil, hammering it into the cavity with tiny mallets, which takes hours and is incredibly tedious, but it saves the tooth. They are using amalgam, a mix of silver and mercury, which sparks a massive controversy known as the Amalgam War in America, but is slowly being accepted in Britain because it is cheap and effective. But this rise to respectability comes with a cost. As dentistry becomes a profession, it becomes exclusive. The Dental Act of 1878 is the final nail in the coffin of the old ways. It establishes a register. To call yourself a dentist or dental surgeon, you now have to be on the list. You have to prove you have training. You have to pay fees. This creates a class divide that historians still argue about today. Did the professionalization of dentistry help the public, or did it abandon the poor? By raising the standards, they also raised the prices. Mr. Sterling, with his velvet chair and his Latin words, charges guineas, not shillings. The working class, the dock workers, the maids, the street sweepers, can't afford him. So where do they go? They go back to the shadows. They go to the men who didn't make the register, the men who took down the dentist sign and put up a sign that said teeth adapted or dental worker. The barbers and the blacksmiths didn't disappear, they just went underground. The polite nightmares split into two realities: the sanitized, expensive clinic for the rich and the bloody, unregulated backroom for the poor. But standing in Mr. Sterling's office, looking at his framed diploma, you feel a sense of progress. You are no longer a customer buying a service. You are a patient receiving treatment. There is a gravity to it. He picks up a mirror, a real dental mirror, angled to see behind the teeth. He warms it over a small spirit lamp so it doesn't fog up in your mouth. This tiny gesture of consideration feels revolutionary. He isn't just yanking, he is inspecting. "Open, please," he says, his voice calm and authoritative. You open. You feel safe, or at least safer. You know that he isn't going to put a foot on your chest. You know that his tools were likely washed, or at least wiped with a clean cloth. You know that he has read a book about anatomy, which puts him miles ahead of the competition. There is a fringe tidbit about the lengths these new professionals went to in order to distance themselves from the barbers. Some of them refused to display any teeth in their windows. Instead, they displayed art, or fossils, or scientific instruments. One famous London dentist displayed a collection of stuffed birds. The message was clear: I am a man of science and culture, not a butcher. As you sit in the hydraulic chair, listening to the soft tick of a grandfather clock, no longer the screaming of other patients, you realize that the era of the light, bloody sport is ending. Dentistry is becoming boring. It is becoming clinical. It is becoming quiet. But then Mr. Sterling reaches for a new device. It sits on a side table, looking like a strange pedal-powered spinning wheel connected to a flexible cable. It is the dental engine, the first true drill. He smiles, a polite, professional smile. I believe we can save this one, he says. We just need to clear out the decay. He puts his foot on the treadle. The wheel begins to spin. A low, mechanical whir fills the room. It is a new sound. It is the sound of the future. And as he brings the spinning burr toward your mouth, you realize that while the barbarism of the pliers is gone, a new kind of terror, the terror of the high-pitched whine, is just beginning. The profession has arrived, and it has brought its own soundtrack. We have reached the final frontier of our Victorian journey. We have survived the brute force of the tooth key, the fiery gamble of the ether sponge, and the toxic vanity of the lead whitener. But now, as the 19th century begins to wind down and the dawn of the 20th approaches, you are about to encounter the two technologies that will define modern dentistry. One is a sound. The other is a light. Let's start with the sound. You are sitting in Mr. Sterling's velvet chair. He tells you that your tooth has a cavity, but, miracle of miracles, he doesn't want to pull it. He wants to excavate it, so he wants to clean it out and fill it with gold or amalgam. To do this, he needs to cut away the rot. In the old days, which frankly was just 10 years ago, he would have used a hand drill. Imagine a tiny corkscrew that he would twist between his fingers, slowly scraping away the enamel. It was agonizingly slow. It took hours. But now Mr. Sterling has the latest gadget from America, the dental engine. Do not let the name fool you. When we say engine, we aren't talking about a high-powered electric motor. We are talking about leg power. The device looks like a Frankensteinian cross between a spinning wheel and a sewing machine. There is a heavy iron flywheel at the base, connected to a foot pedal, a treadle. A series of pulleys and a flexible cable snake their way up to a handpiece that holds a small, sharp burr. Mr. Sterling positions the drill. He places his foot on the pedal, and he begins to pump, rhythmic thumping, whirr, rhythmic thumping, whirr. The drill begins to spin. It isn't the ultrasonic whine of a modern air turbine drill that spins at 400,000 RPM. This is a low-speed grinder. It manages perhaps a few thousand revolutions per minute, and only if Mr. Sterling has been doing his cardio. He touches the burr to your tooth. The sensation is entirely new. It isn't the sharp crack of extraction. It is a vibration, a relentless, rattling vibration that travels from the tooth through your jawbone and directly into the base of your skull. It feels as though your entire head is being shaken apart from the inside. Because the drill is slow, it generates friction. Modern drills use water jets to keep the tooth cool. Mr. Sterling has no water jet. As he drills, the tooth heats up. You can smell it. It is a distinct, acrid scent, the smell of burning bone dust. It smells like a hoof being shod, or antlers being sawed. It is the smell of your own body turning into smoke. And the noise. It is a mechanical drone, rising and falling in pitch as Mr. Sterling pedals harder. If he gets tired, the drill slows down, snagging and dragging on the enamel. You find yourself mentally cheering him on, praying for him to pedal faster just to get it over with. Nearly there, he grunts, his forehead glistening with sweat. Dentistry is now an aerobic activity, but despite the heat, the smell, and the skull-rattling vibration, this machine is a savior. It allows for precision. It allows the dentist to remove only the disease, leaving the healthy structure behind. It is the beginning of conservative dentistry. You are keeping your tooth. You are walking out of here with the same number of bones you walked in with, which is a massive statistical improvement over the last 50 years. But if the drill is the sound of progress, the X-ray is the sight of it. It is 1895. A German physicist named Wilhelm Röntgen has just discovered a mysterious new kind of ray that can pass through solid objects. He calls them X-rays because X stands for the unknown. Within months, the news travels to dental offices in London and New York. For the first time in human history, we can see the enemy. Before this moment, a dentist was essentially guessing. He could see the hole on the surface, but he couldn't see the abscess at the root. He couldn't see the impacted wisdom tooth pushing against the nerve. He had to wait for the patient to scream or for the gum to swell to know something was wrong deep down. Now, Mr. Sterling brings out a terrifying apparatus. It involves a glass tube, a Crookes tube, suspended on a wooden stand. There are wires connected to a high-voltage coil. When he flips the switch, the air crackles with static electricity. The tube glows with an eerie greenish-yellow light. It looks like trapped lightning. "Hold this," he says, placing a small glass photographic plate wrapped in black paper inside your mouth. You have to hold it against your own gum with your finger. He aims the glowing tube at your face. "Stay very still," he commands. In the modern world, a dental X-ray takes a fraction of a second. The machine beeps, and it's done. But in the late Victorian era, the film is slow, and the rays are weak. You have to sit there, staring into the hissing, glowing tube for 20 minutes of bombardment. You are bathed in radiation. There is no lead apron. There is no thyroid shield. Mr. Sterling isn't standing behind a wall. He is standing right next to you, adjusting the tube, perhaps even holding it steady with his own hand. Neither of you knows the danger. The concept of radiation poisoning doesn't exist yet. X-rays are seen as a magical form of light. In fact, they are a novelty. People think they are harmless. There are X-ray parties where society ladies let guests look at the bones in their hands for fun. But soon, the side effects begin to show. After your appointment, you might notice your skin feeling hot, like a sunburn. A few days later, the hair on that side of your face might fall out. Dentists begin to complain of dermatitis on their fingers, the fingers they use to hold the film in your mouth. Later, these pioneers will pay a heavy price. Many early radiologists and dentists will lose fingers, then hands, and finally their lives to radiation-induced cancers. They are the martyrs of the invisible light. But right now, sitting in the chair, you only feel the wonder. Mr. Sterling develops the plate in a darkroom closet. He comes back holding a dripping negative. He holds it up to the gaslight. And there it is, a ghostly black and white image of your own skull. You see the roots of your teeth anchored in the bone like trees in the earth. You see the hidden filling. You see the secret landscape of your own body that was previously visible only to the gravedigger. Extraordinary, Mr. Sterling whispers. It is the final triumph of the Victorian era. They have conquered the pain with ether, mostly. They have conquered the extraction with the drill, mostly. And now, they have conquered the darkness with the X-ray. The journey from the blacksmith's rusty pliers to this moment of glowing electrical insight has been long, bloody, and terrifying. It was a time of laudable pus and therapeutic torture. It was a time when beauty was bought with lead poison and relief was bought with suffocation. But as you step out of Mr. Sterling's office and into the bustling street of the late 1890s, you are carrying a legacy. The gap in your gum where Mr. Grindle pulled your tooth is a reminder of the past. The gold filling Mr. Sterling just placed is a promise of the future. The battle of the mouth is changing. It is no longer a desperate melee. It is becoming a managed care. The Victorian era took the human mouth, a place of mystery, superstition, and agony, and dragged it, kicking and screaming, into the light of science. And as you walk home, passing the electric street lamps that are just beginning to replace the gas, you realize that you are the bridge. You are the generation that suffered so the future could smile. You endured the brick dust and the boar bristles so that one day someone could lie back in a reclining chair, listen to soft jazz, and complain that the mint flavoring is a little too strong. You have survived the polite nightmare, and now, finally, you can rest. Now let the noise of the drill fade away. Let the hiss of the gas lamp and the crackle of the X-ray machine soften into silence. We are leaving the shop now. We are leaving the street. We are stepping back from the history, back from the struggle, and returning to the safety of the present moment. Imagine the door of the dentist's office closing softly behind you, shutting out the smell of cloves and ether. You are walking out into a cool, gentle rain. It's that soft, rhythmic London rain that washes the soot from the cobblestones and turns the world into a blur of gray and silver. The air is fresh. The tension in your jaw is releasing. You don't have to be brave anymore. You don't have to keep a stiff upper lip. You can just be. Feel the weight of your own body sinking into your bed. The mattress is soft, supporting you. There are no wooden boards here, no leather straps, no rigid expectations. You are warm. You are safe. The horrors we talked about, the pliers, the keys, the chemicals, they are all locked away in the past, ghosts that cannot touch you. Listen to the sound of your own breathing, slow, steady, deep. It is a rhythm of peace, not panic. The city of the past is sleeping now. Mr. Grindle has hung up his apron. Mr. Sterling has turned off his machine. The fires are banked, the lights are dimmed, and the world is quiet. Drift along this river of silence. Let the stories dissolve into the dark, leaving only a sense of gratitude for the comfort you have right now. Your heavy limbs are relaxing. Your eyes are heavy. The fog is rolling in, but it is a gentle fog, a blanket of sleep wrapping around you, warm and protective. You have made it through the journey. You have learned the history, and now you have earned the rest.